week 7 of our HTML, CSS and JavaScript course, and in this lesson we will learn how to create a navigation bar. Navigation bars are very important and you'll find them almost on every site. So this is a simple navigation bar, but this is the page that we have been trying to create in last few weeks. And notice this page, this is a single page website so far, and we do not have any navigation bar. So today's main objective is to be able to learn how to create a navigation bar, and this is the new element that we will learn about today, nav. And then within this nav element we will add multiple anchor tags, and then we'll use some CSS tricks to make it beautiful. And then we will also learn how to target selected anchor elements rather than selecting all the anchor elements on the page. And last but not least, pseudo class hover, and we'll learn what that does. This is how our page looks like. I will change the size of my browser, and this is the folder that has our index page, a simple index page, as well as this image. And I will drag and drop this onto my text editor, which is Visual Studio Code, and I will change the size of my editor again so we can see our web page and also our code. So creating the navigation bar is very simple. As always, I will try to make it as simple as possible. So after the opening body tag, just before this image element, I will type in nav and I'll press tab. So I have just created an element called nav, and then I will type a and then press tab. So I have just created an anchor, an opening anchor tag and a closing anchor tag, which is empty at the moment. And then it has an attribute, href attribute, hypertext reference attribute, which is the most important attribute for the anchor element. And within this href, I'll provide a fake reference. So I'll type in hash, and then I will say home between the opening and closing anchor tags. So if I now save it, and you can see and refresh this, you'll see that we have a link here that says home, which is this page. So I will create 4 copies of it. So Control C and Control V, Control V again. This one I will call it about us, for example. This one contact us, and this one will say store. Save it again and refresh it. So we now have a very basic navigation bar which can be fully functional, but we want to make it look a bit more beautiful, a bit more attractive. So I'll change the size of my browser one more time, and then we'll apply some CSS properties to these elements. So I'll go to CSS area, style tags, and just before the closing style tag, I will target this element nav. And the way we do it, as you already know, an AV and an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. And I want to change the background color to something similar to the color of this aeroplane. So I will select this, and then I'll click onto this icon, and then something like this. Probably something like this would do. So if I now save it and refresh it, you can see that we have a navigation bar, full width of the web page, but the height is a bit too small. So we can go back to our CSS area, and I will change the height of this navigation bar to 40 pixels. Save it again, refresh it, we have a navigation bar that is 40 pixels in height, and then this writing is almost invisible, so we want to change the color of this text. For that, I want to target all the anchor elements, but I don't want to target this anchor element. So there's one more which is just here. So this is another anchor tag which will take you to an image of the aeroplane. So I will say nav. I'm saying all the anchor elements, so within the nav element. So I will type in an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket, and I will say color white. Save it and refresh it. We now have this writing white in color, which makes it very obvious. I do not want to have these underlines here. So again, within nav A, notice that the color of this anchor element has not changed, because we are only targeting all the anchor elements within this nav element. So nav space A, and then whatever the properties that you want to type in. So we do not want these underlines, so I will say this a CSS property, text decoration, and I will say none. Text decoration none will remove these underlines. Perfect. The next thing that we want to do is to apply some paddings. So these text, so this text becomes in the middle, and for that I'll target the nav element, and I will say padding 0 from top to bottom and 9 pixels from left to right. Save it and refresh it. Hasn't done much, but we will add some more CSS in the anchor area. So I will say padding 9 pixels here as well. Let's see what happens. Save it and refresh it again, and then I want to change the font size to 18 pixels. Save it, refresh it. Font size is a bit better, and we want to use uniform font family. So I will say font family, and we have been using Verala round for this website. And refresh it. We have Verala round font, which is similar to this font here and this font here. Change the size of my browser one more time. A few more things that I want to add is display inline block, and we will learn about this CSS property in detail, so I do not want to explain it right now. Just copy me and type in display inline block. Save it, refresh it, and now we have our text in the middle of the navigation bar. The next thing that we want to do is to target is to use the hover pseudo class, okay, on anchor elements. So change the size of my browser one more time, and I will say I am targeting all the anchor elements, and I will say hover. So what we are essentially saying that when someone hovers over anchor elements, these anchor elements are, notice when you move your cursor over anything, that is known as hovering. And by default, notice the shape of the cursor, it looks like an arrow, but when I hover my mouse over an anchor element, that shape changes to something that looks like a hand, which indicates that this is a clickable item, but this is known as hovering. So I'm hovering over this text, I'm hovering over this text, I'm hovering over on this video. And when I hover over onto anchor elements, you can see that the shape of the cursor changes to something called pointer. So when we hover over these elements, we want to apply some CSS properties. Anchor elements and the hover pseudo class, and I want to say background color to white. So when we hover over these anchor elements, we want the background color to be changed to white. So refresh it, and then when I hover my mouse over, you can see that the background color is white now. Since the color of the text is also white, you really cannot see anything that is you cannot really see the text anymore. So change the size of my browser one more time, then go back to this area, and then I will say color black. Save it and maximize it, refresh it. Now when I hover over my anchor elements, you'll see that the background color changes to white and the text color changes to black, and this makes it very obvious for the users. We want to further beautify our navigation area, so I will say border radius to 30 pixels, and you can experiment with all these properties. Save it and then maximize it, refresh it, and you can see that the background radius, it has some background radius which is 30 pixels. And one thing, if you notice that this anchor element is far more bigger than this one, so we want them to have uniform size. So I will say all these elements should have a width of 100 pixels. So save it and maximize it, refresh it, and then all these elements have a width of 100 pixels. But notice that the text is not in the center of the element. So change the size of my browser one more time, and then we can say text align center. Save it and maximize the browser, refresh it, and then if you notice, the text is in the center of the anchor elements. One more thing, I'll change the size of my browser one more time. I will say border 1 pixel solid black. Save it and then maximize the browser, refresh it, and then now we should have a background that is 1 pixel thick, and which makes it look a bit more beautiful. So this was the simplest navigation bar that I have created. I've tried to make it very simple. I have avoided some traditions and in order to make it very simple, but it can be fully functional and it looks beautiful. Thank you very much.